A warning before we start. Deadbeat deals with topics around estranged family members and very blended families. Some topics will get very deep and personal. There will be some colorful language. Some content may be triggering. Please take care. We are recording this show on Treaty 1 lands, the original territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dakota, Lakota, Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. Good evening, and thank you for joining me for episode 3 of Deadbeat, the podcast where you help me find my dad. I said in the beginning, I am hoping Deadbeat is a place to share stories, to remind us that despite someone not being there, that shared broken bond actually connects us. I want to share stories and start conversations that deal with disappointment in an effort to empower people that have been hurt, to give them and others comfort and confidence. And that is exactly what happened to me after I spoke with my next guest. On tonight's show, I'm going to talk to Jordan. Jordan lives a couple provinces away from me. I discovered Jordan's story after it hit the media. He found his dad after years of searching, with a big twist after finding him.
Well, as we were talking and we saw each other on video, I was like, oh, I worked with you before. And he's like, yeah, you look familiar.
Huh.
I'm like, no way. I worked with you for like 3 to 4 years. He's like, yeah. In the mall. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh man, I can't believe this. I was just blown away by this.
He found out he had actually met and even worked with his dad before he knew the connection. You will want to hear how his story played out.
He was like, I met him when I was younger. I knew who he was and everything.
That's crazy.
And I remember looking at him and thinking that there was something familiar about him. It's just such a weird feeling. But it's kind of like it's out of a movie.
Jordan was so gracious with his time during the interview, and the amount of advice he gives me for my search is priceless. I got to know Jordan and learned he is damn near an expert in DNA research and databases. He is funny and very spiritual. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him that. But after our conversation, I found a new confidence and motivation and a lot of comfort. I also think I found a new friend. Thanks again, Jordan. Here is Jordan from Calgary with his story on how he found his dad. You started your search around 2020. Like, were you always like for me, I sort of always dipped in and out of my search. Like, I was always raised by my grandparents, and, I always had kind of that father figure, and it didn't bother me, but I looked a couple times in my life. Tell me what your experience was like were you on the search when you were young? Is this like, were you just started your search 2 years ago? How did all that go?
Well, back to what you're saying, because it's like off and on, and you looked into yours, but when I really think about it, there's a lot of stress that's involved, and a lot of, I guess, sort of some anxiety when you start looking, and you think you're going to figure it out, and then you come to a point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, or I give up, and then you come back to it again. And I think everybody comes to that conclusion, and they feel that way. But I didn't, I think for me it kind of started when I was born. I know it kind of sounds kind of crazy. So my dad wasn't in my life. I mean, the alleged father that everybody said that was my father, mm-hmm. He wasn't really in my life. He was at the beginning. He was with my mom for about maybe a year or so, and she really thought that he was my dad, and she really believed it. And I had no idea growing up, but I assumed he was my dad. But he was out of the picture. He was out of my life because my mom moved, and so I never really got to meet him. Mm-hmm. I tried to talk to him when I was, growing up. So this alleged father is the guy that I thought was my dad, and so I always had questions about who he is.
About this first fellow.
Yeah, this alleged father.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought, okay, well, who's my father? Who's this guy? Because he was there in the beginning of my life, but I don't remember him. And it was kind of confusing because when I was growing up, I had thoughts where I thought I was adopted because I didn't quite look like anybody in my family on my mom's side of the family, which is kind of funny. And, but for me, I was willing to accept that that's a possibility. So by the time I was 13, I went looking for this guy that said was my dad, and everybody believed it. And it turned out I met him when I was 13, and he wasn't. When I met him, he didn't have the same personality as me.
Oh yeah.
And we didn't share the same we didn't share the same qualities. He wasn't there all the time for me. So it was kind of, to me, it was kind of like, okay, great. Now, I met him, but things aren't going that well. But he told everybody I'm his son, but he just not in the picture. But I kept looking at his photos and I'm like, okay, he doesn't look like me. This is weird. And I had that suspicion growing up where, like I said, okay, maybe I'm adopted, right? But, yeah. So I kind of just gave up after meeting him that, okay, well, maybe that is my dad and I'm just going to have to live with that this alleged father's my dad.
Yeah, that would be it would be kind of interesting, eh? Because you think you get all these answers and it sounds like you had more questions after you met him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I asked my mom about it, just questions about him, and she's like, well, your dad, should go on complain about other things, and I let it go. But I had a lot of suspicion where I knew something was wrong, something was out of place, like I really sensed it. And I felt like, okay, maybe there's something else going on here. And my mom would always tell me, oh, when I was pregnant for you, you were born late. And it didn't clue to me that she said that. And so anyway, that actually had something to do with it. So I got my DNA test done. This would have been in 2019.
Okay.
I did it. Yeah, I did AncestryDNA, and I decided to travel throughout Asia. And when I was in Asia, this is kind of how it all began. Excuse me. But I was in the Philippines, and I got my results. And I was there at my Airbnb, and I was looking at the results, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, these people that are on here, they're all different last names than the name that I have. Like,
there was no connections, there was nothing in the tree.
Nothing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I see all the people from my mom's side, but I was thinking, thinking about everything, little interaction that I had with this alleged father, and I'm thinking about what my mom had said and everything. So I was bothered to ask my mom, but I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to figure this out when I get home.
Yeah.
But while I was in my travels, I went to Cambodia during that same period. I left the Philippines, went over to Thailand, Cambodia, and I was at a temple. And I clearly remember this, that I had just finished visiting their genocide museum and the killing fields. They had a genocide that happened there back in the 70s. So when I went back to I went to the temple to go pay my respects. As I was there, I was, paying my respects, but I remember it's like they have that big Buddha shrine and everything, and I was laying down and I was praying for them. And right when I was stood up, I had this thought just come over me, and I'm not sure why. There was something that was related to the children that was there, but it had this thought come over me that I have a real dad out there, and he's probably sitting watching TV, or I just had this image of whoever this guy is, and I just realized that I can throw these things away, these thoughts. When I saw the results, I knew right away that there was something else was happening.
Gotcha.
And I felt that, okay, I have a real dad out there, and this guy, alleged father, can't be my dad. He's probably not, because I had these instincts all along. And I can't lie to myself. I have to listen to it, right? So when I went back to the room, I
First of all, what a wild place to get that vision, eh? Like, wow.
Yeah,
Like,
it's very strange, and I tell people that, and I think it's very unrelated to my story, but it is related, because the moment you have these gut instincts, you should listen to them, really, because that's your brain's telling you something. And I keep thinking about when my alleged father and me were wrestling in the backyard one day, and I was 16, and he put me in a headlock, and I took a whiff of his arm, and something in my brain was like, this guy, I don't think he's your dad. Like, something was like something off about
like
it.
a natural instinct or something.
And
yeah.
I thought about that too, but I just ignored it. And it kind of goes back to like when I think about the study they have with budgies, these birds. So when they separate the eggs and they put them in incubators and they hatch and everything, once they're ready to go, they release them back out into their cages. They can literally find their father. The newborn budgie.
The budgie can come back home?
Yeah, he'll go through all the birds and he'll find his father, and the father will know that it's his kid.
Wow.
It's a really weird thing, and I've heard about that, and I've always thought, like, maybe this is something that my body was telling me, my brain was telling me there's something different going on. But anyway, yeah, it's such a weird thing that it only happened when I was at the temple.
That's wild, yeah, because of all the things you could be, like, I can't imagine what the view there even would be like, for all the things you could be thinking, for that to pop in your head. It's got to mean something, you would think, like.
Yeah, it was, I went there to pray. I went there to pray for all the, the millions of people that, that passed away throughout that genocide and everything that happened to them. And to think that that's what I was thinking. And then when I stood up to suddenly be thinking that.
Yeah, that's wild.
I feel like it's something like I was supposed to be there. Or maybe I was supposed to go to that temple, and it's just the universe works its weird ways, or maybe throughout the process, I just came to a conclusion, and being there just helped me understand that. I'm not really sure. It was kind of a really weird feeling, and I decided, it started right after that.
So that's kind of where your new journey started. That's awesome. That's a neat story.
Yeah, my new journey, and it was a very difficult one, because there's a lot of times I wanted to drop the whole thing.
So this is now like 2020 we're talking, eh? Like.
Yeah, we're going into 2020, and I remember in 2019. So when I did go back to my Airbnb, I asked my alleged father, can you please do a DNA test? And he's like, nope, and he didn't want to do one. And I was like, okay, that's great. This isn't helping me.
Yeah, and you were just talking the same as you, like the Ancestry one, like.
Well, yeah, for me to get him to do this alleged father to get him to do a DNA test wasn't because I wanted to know if he was my father or not. It's because I wanted to filter out everybody that wasn't.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And I know,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, and in order to find your dad or your mom or anybody, that's the first step, is you need to filter things out. And there's only a few ways to do that. And the most important way is having them to do a DNA test. It could be their relatives, could be their uncles or aunts. But I struggled with him having to do a DNA test, and it wasn't until the end of 2020, towards the end of 2020, that I realized that my uncle's DNA was on there the whole time.
Oh, wow.
Well, my alleged uncle.
Yeah, like
so his brother. Yeah,
like there was already a piece there that you.
Yeah, and everybody said that I looked like him. But the funny thing was, when I clicked on his name, he was my sixth cousin.
Oh, weird, eh?
Yeah, and so then his sister, his sister decided to do her DNA, and same thing. And then when my alleged father got whiff of it, heard about everything that was going on, he decided to finally do it. He couldn't believe it. So he went to go do it. And turns out he wasn't my dad, that he was my cousin, my fifth or sixth cousin. So
because it shows,
me and him haven't talked since. Because it sounds crazy, but we had no reason to talk. It's kind of strange.
Well, even having that conversation with him to do the DNA test, that must be like, what was that like?
It was very difficult because he would just absolutely say no, and there was no reason to it. He was against it. When I was younger, when I did ask him, he was worried about child support and other things like that. Mm-hmm. Just the typical things that obviously I should have done something when I was younger, but I didn't. DNA tests weren't really as such a novelty as they are now.
Yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, it's a lot easier now.
Yeah. Yes. So once I found out that he wasn't, that's really when the search really started to happen, and I dug in my heels and just tried to figure it out, and it from there. Sorry, I know this is a long answer to what.
No, this is great. I love it.
Yeah, it definitely took a lot longer than I expected, but that's how it all started. It's just insane.
And did you start talking to people like through the DNA site, or who did you get a hold of first, or how did that part go? Like finding your actual dad.
Yeah, so I started messaging people, and everybody was pretty much saying the same thing. I don't know who your dad is, but here's my family tree. And I'm like, okay, that does not help me at all.
Yeah.
At all. Like, it doesn't, I can look at this tree. There's hundreds of people, and I messaged almost everybody.
I'm actually finding, sorry to interrupt you, I'm actually finding that same struggle right now, that some of those trees, like trying to reverse engineer stuff on that site, you almost get lost. Like,
and there's definitely a way to do it, and I could explain that later, but the responses were quite vague, and they weren't very helpful. One guy responded to me, and he goes by the name Justin. He's my cousin, and he told me, well, we're originally from St. John, New Brunswick, and he told me that who his mother was, and his mother's a LeBlanc. That was her maiden name. And I was like, okay, so I'm related to the LeBlancs. And I built up the family tree, and there's Matt LeBlanc. So I'm related to Joey, the character Joey from the TV show Friends.
Oh, wow.
Matt LeBlanc.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's my fourth or fifth cousin.
Wow.
Or he could be third. I could be wrong. But so he's a relative of mine. But I didn't know this until after. So this Justin guy, he shared me his tree. He actually came to Calgary to visit some family, and they invited me over, and I got to meet them. And it was such a really neat feeling to meet my cousins but not know who my dad is.
Yeah, that would be kind of odd, eh?
Yeah, and I can see their facial features, and it really I felt more at home, and they acted more like me, and which was really, really crazy. I really thanked them and everything, and we hugged each other, took some photos. It was a really good feeling, but it didn't answer anything for me though, and that was the problem. And then I had another person reach out to me, and she said, I'll help you find your dad. And she gave me a few names, but those people turned out not to be my dad. But she shared the family tree, and she was very proactive on trying to solve this riddle or problem. But it was very difficult. So I had her last name, which was Cormier. And in the Cormiers, they had arsenals, but no LeBlancs anywhere. So it was really confusing. None of it made sense. Mm-hmm. And I was able to connect the two at the beginning of the year in 2021. Excuse me. I came across this Pat Arsenault, which his parents, he comes from the Arsenault lineage. And he also comes from a LeBlanc side, but there's Bouchers there. So it didn't make any sense because I thought it was too far. Because when we talk about centimorgans, we talk about DNA, it's really hard to understand because one person can look like, you know, it could be one of their brothers or sisters or uncles. And some other people can be really far away, but share strong DNA. Because DNA, when we have our DNA, it kind of picks and chooses who they want to carry the DNA from. So it was really difficult because, yes, I have these names, but this person's so far away, and then this other person, like this Cormier, her father did his DNA, and they put it on the website. But he was so many generations above that it was hard to say how closely related to any of his relatives or closer relatives. So it's kind of like saying maybe his nephew is my dad because his DNA was so strong.
Yeah.
But we can't look at the DNA. We can only look at the DNA as a marker, which I didn't understand that. Like, you have to look at it as just kind of a smaller thing. But yeah, all the responses were quite the same. And I did get the responses from those two, and it kind of reached a dead end. I wasn't getting anything. And so this woman, the Cormier, she was here in Alberta, which is kind of funny because it's not very far from where I live. And then another one reached out to me. She was in Red Deer from my dad's side, because you're able to filter it out once you receive your own, like other people on your mother's side. Once they do their DNA, you're able to filter out who's on your dad's side. So
it breaks it down or whatever.
Dad's side.
Yeah.
But she didn't know anything about her family, so I built her family tree for her.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You're going to be an expert. You're going to be an expert on this, on that DNA site.
Pardon me?
You're going to be an expert after this is all done on that DNA site. You're going to be like an expert.
Yeah, I think I am. Like I think it's funny. Like, I feel like I can work for a police force doing cold case files.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
I had no name. And every time I'd ask my mom, okay, like, who is this guy? Oh, I don't know, but Randy, and his name is Randy, my alleged father. He's your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not. And my mom has a brain tumor, which they didn't put in the story in the headlines, because you don't want to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
But it's all good. It's not cancerous or anything like that. But she couldn't remember this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that made it even worse. So there was a lot of times, like, I get these responses from people, oh, we have this in the family tree, we have that. But there was no leads. There was nothing. I was messaging last names on Facebook and social media to try to get responses out of other people to see if they knew anything.
So
that was very difficult.
You were hitting a lot of walls, it sounds like.
I was, yeah. I definitely was. And I found that it caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, where you feel like it's right underneath your nose and you know the answer. And it could be just anybody. And you have your parent naming off all these names, but she has a brain tumor and she doesn't remember exactly what happened. So it's kind of a really bad scenario. And I remember trying to sleep every night for before all of this, but I tried to sleep every night, and I'd be going to sleep at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, because all I'd be thinking about is who this guy is.
Yeah.
And sometimes she would name off people that she dated prior to being with the alleged father, and some of them had passed away already.
Oh yeah.
So it was very difficult. It was very difficult to think that, okay, well, you might be related to this person that you're staring at a photo or this name, but you have nothing to approach it. You have nothing to communicate with these people, and some of them are not living. So it's very tough. Yeah. And so there was many times I gave up, and I thought like, I'm just never going to find the answer. And we want to know the answer because our minds are always thinking about it, or, our minds are wandering about it all the time. And don't want to keep your brain spinning. You want to know what it is. You want the answer, and you want to feel grounded. And that's feeling more grounded with yourself, and then it solves everything. And I feel like some people live their lives being happy without knowing. And for me, I couldn't do that. I feel like I knew the answer, and that I could, if I'm able to solve a Rubik's Cube in less than a week, I should be able to solve this answer. And that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you really put your mind to something like that, you definitely could do it. But I had no idea, how long it would have taken to figure this out. But I also didn't realize how fast it was going to happen, which was just pretty insane.
Yeah, it is. That is kind of, it's crazy how it did happen for you pretty quick. Like, what was the big break after that got things moving?
Well, I realized that I was taking this from a really bad approach. Instead of clicking and looking at people, that I should be doing it differently. And I remember giving up, and I remember my fiance, she was talking to me, and she told me, she's like, no, don't give up. She's like, you can find the answer. You're gonna figure this out. And I really needed that, because I was kind of alone on this whole idea, and I didn't want to tell her.
Yeah.
So I had that support, and I realized, like, she's right. Like, I can figure this out. And so I kind of threw everything away. Everything I wrote, every little Excel sheet, names I wrote down. I was thinking, okay, I'm doing this wrong. So I decided to look at all the matches I had, and I thought to myself, okay, well, how would I do this? And I thought, well, the only way to do this is you need to know everybody. And obviously I can't do that, right?
Yeah.
So what I did was I tried to learn everything I can about every single match. And I learned everything about where my mom was during those years, and what she did, and who she was friends with. And I began talking to some people in my family about where she was at that time. And then I started, I put that aside, kind of used that as a reference. But then I also looked at everything else. I individually, I took everybody individually on my DNA matches from 23andMe, MyHeritage, and AncestryDNA. And I learned everything I could about where their location was and who they're related to.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a long process. But in order to find your biological relative, whoever it is, this is the only way to do it. So what I did was I wrote down their name and where they're from, and I wrote down everything they put for their ancestry tree, going back to the 1600s as far as I could go. And I did everybody's tree, everybody's family tree that they had now became mine, and I made it my tree. But I had no idea where I fit in there, but I did that. And so I had all the names compiled of every single person in their family tree, and I continued on to every other person that's in my DNA match, and that's a long process.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's crazy how many people actually pop up.
Yeah, so I had approximately 1,500 people that I went through. And I'm not going to lie, some of them were also on Ancestry as well, so I was able to kind of scratch out that. And then there's people that are also on your mother's side and your father's side, so that's kind of strange, but that does happen.
Yeah.
But it's because of DNA. Some things are shared. There's one piece here and there's one piece there. So what I did after that was I decided to write. Like, I wrote all the names down, but I tried to find a common person, and I came up with three or four common. Actually, I should say there was 6 common relatives, and 2 that really stood out in their family trees.
So, you're saying process of elimination again, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So I found 2 of them, a Fidel Arsenault and an Agnes Glant, and then I found Soisem Arsenault and some other relatives as well. So what I did was I built that tree and I built it downward. And after I did that, I still was kind of at a dead end because I wasn't able to connect the LeBlancs to that family tree. But then I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe there's something I missed, and it was becoming very complicated because I had all this information, but I wasn't able to get an answer from it. But I had the tree. I knew that these people are closely related to me.
Yeah.
Because of this common ancestor. Anyway, I was thinking Occam's razor. The most simplest answer is usually the best answer. And I was thinking, okay, well, 2 years ago, I came across this Pat Arsenault when I was mentioning the LeBlancs and the Bouchers about my cousin. I'm like, that's weird. So I went back and I took that tree and I connected it, and all of a sudden everything connected.
Oh yeah, it was like the piece.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, I found it. And I was thinking, awesome. Okay, but this guy's passed away. This Pat Arsenault.
Oh.
And I'm like, this is not good. This could be my dad. And I was like, that's all I have is just one name. I don't have anything. I don't have obituaries or anything like that. It just happened to be that this DNA showed up on my 23andMe, and I messaged them, and they didn't answer. But so what I did was I clicked on their common relatives, and I clicked on one that was closely related to them, and then I messaged them instead. And she answered the phone, and she was, getting on a cruise ship in Florida. She's like, I don't know much about the family tree, but she was like, welcome to the family, and but you should call my daughter, who's in Toronto. She knows a lot about the family, and she can share you the family tree. I'm like, okay. So I called her daughter, and as soon as she shared the family tree, it all made sense. Everything that I found before was also pieced together. But I told her, what do I do now? I said, I don't have anything. Like, this all makes sense now, how I'm related to everybody, because she was able to share her tree.
Mm-hmm.
And this Pat Arsenault he's passed away. And she's like, well, not entirely. And she shares me this thing she found online about his relatives, that he had 2 brothers. And it was an online page, and at the bottom of the page, it says that it was created by his brother. And it was sitting there on the internet the entire time.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. And it was just a tripod page that this guy created. So I saw the name, Roger. I messaged him, and he responded. And the more I talked to him and saw his photos, I realized that it's my dad. He talks like me, looks like me, responds the same.
And that's wild for somebody you've never met, right? Like,
well, as we were talking and we saw each other on video, I was like, oh, I worked with you before. And he's like, yeah, you look familiar.
Huh.
I'm like, no way. I worked with you for like 3 to 4 years. He's like, yeah, in the mall. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh man, I can't believe this. I was just blown away by this.
that would have been so crazy. So you were working with him for 3-4 years.
Yeah, so Pat that passed away, that's his brother Roger. Roger is a guy that I worked with at the mall for 3.5 years. And he was like, I met him when I was younger. I knew who he was and everything.
That's crazy.
And I remember looking at him and thinking that there was something familiar about him. It's just such a weird feeling. And like I said in one of my interviews, that it's kind of like it's set of a movie. I couldn't believe it. But at the same time, I remember standing next to him when I first met him, when we worked together, that there was something about him that looked very, wasn't odd. It's just a weird feeling that came over me.
Like the opposite of that natural feeling like you had with the other people, maybe.
Yeah, I remember my ex at the time, I was walking with at the mall. She's like, yeah, he's got your face, sort of. And I didn't think anything.
Yeah.
But I remember like, when I met him, I'm like, because I kind of thought who my dad was, but when I met him, I was kind of thinking like, he could be he kind of looks like what would be my dad, because he looks like me. But I never, I didn't really think anything of it. I just kind of walked away, and we knew each other for 3 to 4 years. And it's just kind of weird that when he showed up on video, I'm like, really?
And you like,
I mean, all this time I've been looking for.
You were right there, and you recognized him right away as soon as like it didn't take long to figure out you worked with him before.
Oh no, not at all. I recognized him as soon as we got on video.
Yeah, your story's quite something. You weren't lying when you said they left a lot of details out of the story on the web, eh?
They did, and I believe there are stuff that's left out, and I understand. When we like to talk about news and we like to talk about information, we also have to be careful about information being said differently or being brought out in a way that it seems like it's targeting somebody. And I feel that, yeah, it makes sense to not include my mom's brain tumor. Like, we don't want to make her like seem like the bad person because she has a brain tumor, that she doesn't remember this stuff. And whether we think it's okay, we don't actually know from someone else's perspective of what it actually might feel like. So I understand they left these things out, and I saw the comment section. They say never read the comment section, but it's okay. I got thick skin. Like, I feel like I can write a book about this, about how to find your parents.
I bet you could one day. There's not many out there, I was looking.
Yeah, there's not many, and I've been told by my fiance, by family members, that I should write a book. I've taken so many routes to try to find information. One of my family members is an RCMP officer. Of course, she's not going to give me information. She's not going to break the law. So that didn't work either, right? Yeah. But I can't ask her. So and that's the thing. So we got all this information, but what to do with it? And I think it's very difficult to think that someone's walking around having no idea that you exist. That's exactly how I felt. Yeah, and I felt like they should know whether they want to accept me or not. Because it's weird to think that, what if I had a kid that's out there and I don't know?
Yeah,
there's that, you have that weird possibility. It's just it's a weird feeling. And he didn't know. Like, my dad, my biological father, did not know that I existed.
So how did he take that news once it got going, and once you figured out and you started talking to him? How did he take that news?
Well, it was pretty funny, because when he took the news, like, he was quite shocked, but he was very interested. He thought that he was pretty sure that I was Pat Arsenault's, like, his brother who passed away in a car accident. He was pretty sure that I could be his son. And maybe I was his brother Jerry, who lives in France, but he didn't think that was possible because Jerry took off when he was younger, and so he really thought it was Pat. But then when I showed him the photo of my mom, that's when he remembered.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so he said, yeah, I remember her. And then he was thinking about the whole thing, but before he responded to that, he had dropped his phone and decided to go shovel the driveway. And he was all paranoid, like, okay, what's going on here? Maybe did I do something wrong? All these thoughts that you don't know what happened. You don't know. You're trying to remember all these things, and there's a thought process involved. And it's kind of like if me and you were to find out, hey, well, maybe we do have a kid out there somewhere. Someone has a kid out there, right? We're gonna think of all these things.
Yeah,
he's out there shoveling the driveway, and the RCMP were driving by, shining a light at the house, and they were looking for someone, but not him.
So like
the light shined at him, and he looked at the car, and then he dropped his shovel and ran inside. And he's thinking like, how did he find my house? This guy must have a lot of connections. Like, how did he find me without knowing my name?
And fast, too.
Like, this guy's so smart. He's thinking, like, what's going on here? Why is the police out? Like, so he's thinking of all this, and he's thinking, okay, stop being paranoid. Like, try to rethink. Okay, read what he's saying. And I explained everything, and then he thought about it, and then he got back to me and he said, I remember your mom, and we met here. You know, it was a one night thing. I really liked her. I found her really attractive, and you know, she was a very nice lady, and we hooked up, and then I never saw her again, and I believe that I'm your dad, son. That's what he said.
Oh, wow.
And I broke in tears because for me, it was a very emotional moment in my whole life. It was a much more of a pivot than anything. But I found that's the answer I was looking for. But I still had questions though. But it was perfect that he was able to be honest and just say it as it is.
Yeah, just having that not confrontational right up front must have been amazing.
Yeah, instead of getting someone who says, no. Well, I don't think so. I have 3 kids of my own. I don't think so. And we always hear people say that. But instead of trying to make someone feel that way, why not just help them, right?
Yeah.
And I think my dad was seeing it from that perspective that, okay, well, you know, he's at his moment in life where he's doing things correctly and doing things right. He's happy. Why make someone, you know, why give someone any trouble by not trying to help them and all these other things, right? So he took the right step and the right approach, and I feel like it was the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And from there, what did you guys do from there?
Well, I asked him. I said, "Are you up for doing a paternity test?" And like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, oh, great. I'm like, this is not good because this doesn't answer anything. I'm like, okay, but we can do one private, and I know the perfect DNA company for it. And he's like, okay.
Is it pricey? Just so I know, is that a pricey thing?
No, actually, it wasn't. It wasn't pricey. I think it was around $200, but with shipping and everything that had to be done was came up around $300.
Oh, but reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, so they mailed one out here to Alberta, and then they mailed one out to New Brunswick, and the results came back very quickly. We both sent it back express mail. It's just a cheek swab, it was crazy when I got the results because they didn't tell me in the email, but they have the attachment file, and I clicked on it, and I had to read it about 100 times to see, okay, am I reading this correctly? It says 99.999 whatever proven to be the biological father.
Wow.
And it's highlighted in yellow. And so this company, who used to be Maximum Analytics, they're now called the DNA Lab, I believe. They heard about this story, but I told them prior to the test what this was about, and they were so shocked. Everybody was just excited about the whole thing, because when I opened it, it was the same thing. I couldn't believe it that I was able to finally do exactly what, you know, my girlfriend said I could, or my fiance, you know. And
yeah, that would be amazing, eh?
Yeah, and that's why I mean, like, for anybody that's trying to do it, you know, if you actually just try, like, you know, I believe anybody can, and it's possible. You just have to have the time to do it. You have to have the patience, and it's a lot of work. But after I got the DNA test, I decided to go down there. My foster mother, I have a foster mother, she paid for my plane ticket to go down there with my son, and we went to go see him, and it was the greatest thing that I could ever ask for. Like, it's just perfect. Well, I didn't even ask. She gave me a plane ticket. I didn't even have time to book one myself.
Oh, wow. Like, so you gotta go.
I got to go down there, and I have 3 brothers, and the oldest brother looks exactly like me. It's
what was it like meeting them?
It was great.
Mm-hmm.
So my son is half Filipino. And it's funny that my oldest brother that looks exactly like me, his wife is Filipino.
Oh, wow.
So, and they have Filipino kids. So his cousins are Filipino. I'm like, what are the odds?
Wow.
Yeah. And
how many cousins did you find out on, like, with your brothers? How many kids do they have between the three?
Just the oldest one has children. The other two don't. And the youngest one I've met before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's like a year or so older than me, but I've hung out with him before.
Oh, wow.
And we were shocked to find out. Like when he came out of the house and he stood up there, he looked at him and he's like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is strange."
Like,
and my dad turns around. He's like, "Wait, you guys know each other?" It was, oh man, it was just insane.
oh yeah, that must have been a really, like, rewarding experience. So, like, you found it all in all, like, very rewarding?
It was very rewarding, and the family, I got to meet a lot of family members, aunts and uncles, and they took on that approach very well. I find that my great-grandfather, I share a lot in common with him. His name's Telesphore Arsenault. He was a federal MP in Ottawa back in the day, and just the way he thinks and the way he does things is sort of the same way I feel about life and the way I do things and research stuff. And he even had a school in his name built up behind the house. And talking about the house, the old colonial home in Rishabuktu, New Brunswick, I used to walk by that house every day, and I used to wonder what kind of people lived there.
Oh, wow. It's your family house.
And my dad he grew up there when he was a child. And so did my grandfather and my great-grandfather. He bought that house from a guy in England who had created the house for his wife, but his wife didn't want to move to Canada. So they sold it to my great-grandfather, Telesphore, who was an MP at that time. But, yeah. And so to think that I walked by that house thinking, like, what kind of people live there?
Now you're going to find out.
Yeah, and it's a small world because my mom met my biological father in a different city. They didn't meet in the town.
Wow.
But they're both from that same area. So it's just like, I can't even explain it. It's kind of like it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
But also kind of strange that I walk by that house every day to go to my alleged father's house or his mom's house and thinking that, okay, that's my grandmother, but I'm walking by the house of my grandparents. Yeah.
That's wild, like how it's kind of all intertwined like that, eh?
Yeah, it's kind of a brain twist. There's so many things that you think you knew, or you thought you knew, and then it kind of gets flipped. So I had all these ideas, and I had no idea that,
like you kind of already,
like
you had the story in your head already.
It's like, wow.
Like you kind of had this story already. Like I feel like I already have this story kind of built in my head just from wherever, but like you were surprised how off script everything went.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything went really great, and the cool thing is my dad said, it's like, you know more about the family than I do about the family history, because I studied every person. I had to. And when I heard the one story that really brings a smile to my face is that when I look at the old photos of my grandfather, he looks like me. But what he did this one day, and I wouldn't exist, and we look at it this way, but it was prom night, and he wanted to bring this girl to prom. And he got his horse and carriage from the colonial house, and he went all the way to Rishabuktu village, which is pretty far off, and just outside of Rishabuktu village, to go pick up this girl for prom. And she probably wouldn't have went if he couldn't have done that. But so he went all the way over there, he picked her up, and then he brought her all the way to prom. And they ended up getting married, and they had kids. And just hearing that story, it kind of, it makes me think about, okay, well, all these things that happened. I learned all these things, and I knew about them. And then I hear the story of how they connected was really neat.
Yeah.
So hearing it from the family, it brings such a smile to my face, because you realize the such importance and everything that all these individual people in your family tree have to, with what, like, it makes up who you are, and everything that they've done. And to see that he resembles you, it's a really neat thing. And my dad was telling me, you know what, I'm sorry that I wasn't there your whole life. And I told him, no. I'm like, don't say that. He's like, what? And I told him, yeah, don't tell me that. And I said, if you've never met my mom, my son that I have here, he wouldn't exist today. Neither would I.
Yeah, like,
I think the greatest thing about life is being able to enjoy life itself. If you're able, having life itself is that. I think that's more than anything. And I'm able to accept that. I think a lot of people should be able to, if they're trying to figure out who their parents are, they're trying to figure out whatever's going on. If you learn to accept that things are just sometimes out of our control, we're able to see life a little bit differently. And that was the most important piece to me, was understanding that everybody had their own little role in this thing. And yes, we want things to be different. What if he knew that I was his son when I first met him? Would he have, brushed me away when I met him at work? What would have happened? We don't know, but things just happen the way they are, and we have to accept it, I guess. And yeah,
it's a crazy lesson in that, like, at least that's how I'm kind of learning myself. Just, you got to accept it. Like I'm just questioning my timing of it a lot of times, but I think even becoming a parent, that gets like, when you became a parent, did you find that you needed to solve this puzzle even more so?
Yes, because every moment that I look at my son, mind you, my son looks like the Asian version of me. But every time I see him smile and laugh and look at me, I'm wondering, who am I staring at? Not just my son, but I'm staring at someone else. I'm staring at my father. I'm staring at my great grandfather, my grandfather. You know what I mean? Grandmother. Like, we can't always think patrilineal. We have to think matrilineal as well, because everybody has an important piece to this whole thing. But it definitely had a big influence, because you're a father. You want your kids to know where you come from, and to see my son smiling and thinking, okay, well, whose face am I looking at? Because it's not just mine, and that's what annoyed me the most.
Yeah,
it's not my son annoying me. It was the fact that I'm practically looking at someone that has DNA that's been passed down from me, from other people, and I'm trying to figure out who it is, and he's there smiling away, and it's like, who does he look like, right? And when I finally got to see all my family photos, I see where my son's face comes from.
Oh, that must have been rewarding too, to see that kind of come together, eh?
It is, and these little things are very important. It's a very great reward to see your son meeting your other side of the family and him enjoying everybody's company and seeing them act the same, share the same traits, the same personalities. And you see that, and it's kind of, not to be like, I don't know how to put this, not like very emotional or anything like that, but like when you share, like when you have Christmas, people are watching these Christmas family TV shows or movies, and you think, oh, wouldn't that be great, right? Like, but then you think about your other side of the family, and you think, oh man, I wonder about that. But then when you actually get to figure out who your dad is or who your parents are, and then you find out, it changes everything. It's just like the movie. Like you think, oh wow, like you finally get to enjoy that, and I think that's really great, because I could have just taken a different route and totally ignored it my whole life. That's kind of what I got back to. Like, what I'm getting to is that, yeah, I think we all like to just put it away and like leave it on the shelf, and who cares, because it's just causing stress. But when you do find the answer, all that closure and all that feeling, it's a great feeling, because when you find out, it's a whole new meaning when you go hug your kid again, because you know what you're feeling, and you have people to look back on, where you come from, why you act a certain way, why your child acts a certain way, and everything makes sense.
That was me talking to Jordan from Calgary. Thanks again. In the same week I talked to Jordan, I got my AncestryDNA back. The results were surprising. Look at the email I got.
What?
What does it say?
Well, we click on Explore.
What's this say though?
Answers and results you've been waiting for are here.
My results are in.
Oh.
Explore your DNA results.
Sweet.
That's a reenact. All right. Hello, Travis. This test is shown to match Travis. 41% Norway, 32% Scottish. I knew it. That's the
funny.
The anger.
The anger.
8 other regions. This is interesting. Eh? Great news, Travis. Your results have arrived. Ethnicity breakdown. What do we do?
You just push arrow.
Norway, 41%, southeastern, central, northern Norway. Hadeland, southern Hedmark, southern, southwest Norway. Scotland. Ooh.
You're Irish.
Oh, I got lots of stuff in me here.
Wow.
9% Irish. German. 2% Indigenous.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So wild, eh? So 41% Norwegian, 32% Scottish, 9%
Irish,
5% Wales.
Whale.
This is actually leads to a lot. Like, I'll swing all this by Mom, but Mom said a lot. There was a lot of British, Wales, and she might have said Scotland or Ireland too.
That's so intense. Look at all of them.
3% German, 2% Indigenous Americans North. That's kind of an interesting
Baltics?
Baltics is like
Finland,
and then Eastern European or Russia. And Russia,
look at your
1%.
communities.
DNA communities, Southern Ontario settlers.
Well, there's stories.
Stories of who?
Just from
around that time.
like Norway. That's from Norway.
Oh wow.
Featured matches.
You and 18 of your DNA matches, along with 397,528
are
other
genetically
DNA
linked.
matches. Are
That's
genetically
incredible.
linked through ancestry. Share your results. View your DNA story.
I think.
Let's see. Peterson family tree. Ethnicity estimate. Yeah. The pink is Indigenous, eh?
Yep.
Somewhere in there. That's kind of fascinating, because that part I definitely don't know. Stories, search, DNA. View all DNA matches, or what?
I guess so.
First, second cousin.
Michelle
Yeah,
Warren.
Michelle Warren. Oh, wow.
No.
That's the one on Facebook? Holy fuck.
That's crazy.
Wow.
That's the one you've always had
Talk to.
questions about.
Holy shit.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Distant family.
So that's also good news, because that means that Michelle is probably as curious as me about this stuff.
Probably.
So she'll probably talk to me. That's super interesting.
That's
eh?
so funny. And if you recognize them, you can say yes. Like on Sean, you can
Oh, I
click
see,
yes,
I
you
see.
do, and I think he'll be added to your stuff.
I think like Sean didn't know a lot of his people and everything. Dang.
4th to 6th cousin. That's insane.
Dang.
How did they do this? You should go and see what the percentage of shared DNA was with that Michelle Warren.
Oh, that's interesting.
10% shared
10%
DNA.
shared DNA. Wow.
Wayne Lotta, 12% shared DNA.
That's Wayne.
Wayne.
I have
And then
no
are
idea.
Wayne and Michelle connected? See, that's what you can do with this too. You can back search stuff.
Yeah.
See if he hasn't built this tree. Wayne Latta. Does it show you who these people are?
I have no idea.
So it's definitely through the England Scottish side.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, is that my dad's side?
It's possible.
Super fascinating.
That's
eh?
you're 41% Norway.
Oh,
That's
I'm real
cool.
Norwegian.
In the next episode of Deadbeat, I'm going to try to talk to my mom and see what happens when I reach out to potential family on my dad's side. If you know anything that could put me in touch with any of my potential family, please email the show at deadbeatpodcast1979 @gmail.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen.